We've invited Roxanne today because she is part of the Figuring Space exhibition, which is still up in our gallery until April 16th. Figuring Space is supported by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Ruth Foundation for the Arts. The exhibition presents full-scale figurative sculptures in clay by top artists working in ceramics around the United States. Dr. Kelly Morgan, professor of the practice at Tufts University, who co-curated the show with me, added her integral knowledge of the historical use of the figure in American art over the last 200 years to deepen the Clay Studio's usual focus on contemporary ceramic art. The group of powerful full-scale representations of human figures serve as a body of evidence to lay bare the issues that permeate American art and social culture. They assert their autonomy and subjectivity by presenting cultural critiques through lenses of their own choosing, race, gender, class, and anti-war ideas. Roberto Lugo, Kensuke Yamada, Christina Cordova, Chris Rogers, Sergei Isipov, Christina West, Tip Tolan, Jonathan Christensen Caballero, George Rodriguez, Roxanne Swentzell, and Kyunming Park are the 12 artists in the show. And then I also want to recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenape-Hawking, the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape people. We would like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and the role of all of us to join in their tradition of respect and caring for the land and for each other. Now, I would like to introduce Roxanne. Sorry, I always talk too much in the beginning, but that'll change in a moment. Roxanne Swentzell is a Santa Clara Tewa Native American sculptor, ceramic artist, indigenous food activist, and gallerist. Her artworks are in major public collections, and she has won numerous awards. Swentzell's work addresses personal and social commentary, reflecting respect for family, cultural heritage, and for the earth. Her sculptural work has been exhibited at the White House, as well as in international museums and galleries. She has been commissioned to create permanent installations at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, the Museum of Wellington, New Zealand, and other venues, including the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, right here in Philadelphia. Swentzell is descended from a long line of Santa Clara Pueblo potters from whom she learned customary methods of pottery making. She grew up watching her mother harvest clay from the earth to create hand-coiled and pit-fired pots. Swentzell began to experiment with clay as a child, and she created small figures that depicted her feelings. Her work is included in collections of the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, Cartier in Paris, the Museum of New Zealand, the Santa Fe Convention Center, the Museum of Wellington. Other collections include the Brooklyn Museum, the Heard Museum, the Denver Art Museum, the Jocelyn Art Museum, Nelson Atkins, among others. Thank you for joining us. I am going to start with my question that I ask everyone, Roxanne. How and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Well, first I want to just say thank you for having me at this program, but also being part of the figurative show that's there at the Potter Studio. My art career, or my fixation with clay, started a very long time ago when I was a very small child, because I am from a tribal community whose women mostly worked with clay for many, many generations back, thousands of years actually. And so I was handed clay from my mother at a very young age, because she was making pots, as did her mother and her mother and her mother. And so as a child, I got handed clay at about 3 years old and began to play with it, experiment with it, and found that I could form it into things that could show something that I wanted. And you know, my family were making potteries, but I was drawn to figurative pieces because I had a very severe speech impediment as a child, and I couldn't talk. So you know, as a little kid, you know, you want to tell your mom whatever's going on with you, and if you can't, you know, you either scream and cry or you figure out another way to talk to her. And so for me, I found that creating little figurines that told her something that I wanted to tell her was a way to communicate. And like for instance, like when I started school, it was difficult because of the speech impediment, but I had a hard time in school. So I wanted her to know it was hard for me in school. So I created a small little figure of a girl crying at a school desk, and they were like small figurines, about that big. And then I could give it to her and she would know what's going on with me. And it became the language I used before words. So I think of clay as my first language. And so, at that point, you're not thinking, this is going to be my art career. I'm just thinking, how do I tell my mom what's going on with me? And it gave me a tool to use for communication. And I find that it still does to this day. It speaks in ways that words sometimes can't get to. So that's how I began. I began to just use clay to tell my story or tell things I needed to tell. And as I got older, I got technically better at using the clay. And then I was starting to get recognition for doing that. So that's how it began.
Yeah, that's really special. And I mean, being a mother and you being a mother, I'm sure we can all also appreciate how special it is that your mother really was tuned in enough to know what you were doing. That she understood that you were trying to communicate with those figures is really special. I mean, I think maybe I'm saying more about myself than anything else, right? But we're like running around trying to figure out what to do. And if your kid is trying to give you sort of subtle signals like that, it's really special that she was, patient enough to read your signs that you were giving her. So that's definitely really important. So then I know as you progressed, then you decided to go to art school. So part of the question for me is, I love to hear those early days and like why it for every artist kind of became a passion. And then it is a choice though. I mean, everything in life, when we wake up in the morning, we kind of have to choose what we're doing. So what was it? How were you encouraged, or how did you end up going to art school then from that early period of kind of using it as communication?
Well, when I went to regular public schools, but I was very drawn to art, anything art, drawing, painting, anything to do with art. But I was, of course, already working with clay so much that I was advanced through the art classes very quickly. So that by the time I was halfway through high school, I had run out of the high school's art department choices of classes. So my mother actually got me into a college that was in town that was for Native American artists. And she got me into the school during high school. So that was my first sort of going into a college setting, but it was very Native American oriented, which was a good thing. And I finished my high school through that school. Afterwards, I went to Portland, Oregon, to a school called Portland Museum Art School, and did a year there because they were focusing on the human figure. And that was my specialty of sort. I was making figures, human figures mostly. And so I was very interested in pursuing that. And for the same reasons all along, whatever was going on in my life, I wanted to sculpt about it in some way or another. So, like early on, it might have been just things I saw that I thought were interesting, or the feelings I had inside that I wanted to show in a figure. in my early 20s, it became centered a lot around what does it mean to be a woman in this world of today. There are a lot of pieces around stereotypes, trying to combat that, because I was also dealing with a cultural gap between the tribal communities and the, you know, the larger society of the United States, and trying to understand those two different cultural barriers has been difficult. And I kind of look at my sculptures and think they're like if you put them in chronological order, they would be this amazing 3-dimensional journal, diary of my life, and what was important or not in my life.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I want that book when you publish it. It would be nice. You don't need any words, right? It's just images of the sculptures. Or when you build your own museum, one of those times. So it sounds like early on your work started to have social justice and social issue focus, because you were starting to talk about women's issues and stereotypes. I think personally, I find that ceramics and clay back, 200 years in European art history and much longer in other art histories has almost like an activist bent to it, because it has such a connection to our everyday life. People, I find that artists often use clay to talk about, wanting to change social things as they are, and work towards social justice ends. And that's definitely happening right now. And a lot of the work in the exhibition, Figuring Space, has that, I think, impetus to it. So, but you have not only talk about this in your artwork, but you have all these other aspects of your life in which activism is important, around foodways and other things that are important to you. So can you talk a little bit about how your artwork or other parts of your life have evolved into these social activist activities that are so important?
Sure. I was brought up in a household where my parents spent a lot of time discussing issues or philosophies, or, we didn't just ignore it. We dove in and really tried to figure out what's going on here. And I think that it made me very conscious about the state of the world and what was going on around me on a local area, but also a broader sense of it. And as a little girl, I remember my parents deciding to plant a garden. And I loved that garden. I just thought it was just the most amazing thing to watch plants grow from seed and then produce amazing things at the end. And we also had turkeys and chickens. And I would sit in the chicken coop for hours, just like my friends. These are just the greatest things. And I loved being in nature. I loved being with the animals. And I loved playing with clay. And so they all kind of grew into an art career with the sculpting. But I also continued to be very interested in gardens and the way nature works. And I wanted to keep that going, pursue how to encourage the natural world to be in a healthy way. And as I would see, pollution happening and just a lot of not good things happening, it made me really, really want to strive for helping people understand not to destroy their environment more. In my early 20s, I became involved with permaculture. which is sort of people describe permaculture in many different ways. And I guess one of the ways I think about permaculture is, how do you work with creating your world as a human being to be more like the natural world around you, to be in harmony with it. So we're not destroying our environment. We're not using up all our natural resources in bad ways. And we actually can learn ways to enrich it instead of taking it away. Mm. So me and my husband at the time, we started a nonprofit organization called Flowering Tree Permaculture Institute. And we began to create a homestead that was based on all the permaculture practices to see if we could do that in the high desert of northern New Mexico, which is a really harsh climate to grow your food, or because it gets very hot, it gets very cold, and it's very dry. So all of the roughest conditions, short seasoned, you name it, it's pretty rough. But it made me realize that my ancestors, who have been living in this area for thousands of years, had figured out how to live here sustainably for a long time. So I dove into really studying my ancestral history on how my peoples lived here in a good way. And in relearning some of these methods of living, I began to teach it back into the tribal communities, certain things we had learned that would help us survive into the future. So that's one of the things I do. Today I teach, I do clay work with them because, some of the people have lost the ability to work with clay. So I teach clay work. I do adobe and alternative buildings using solar and mud and straw. I grow gardens. I save traditional heirloom seeds. I do land restoration. I do basketry, weaving, whatever it takes to have a healthy society.
That's amazing. Wow. That's a lot and so amazing. And I can't wait to visit someday. It sounds like a wonderful thing that you are giving back. You're doing it for yourself to make a healthy life, but it's so important that, at that same time, you're sharing it back out again. So you mentioned your mom and I think at least 3 generations, back of your matrilineal heritage were ceramic artists. Can you talk a little bit about, what it meant to you to have that knowledge that they were there watching you, or, that you were part of that lineage?
Yeah, I think, when you're in a society or a culture that like, say your family comes from shoemakers, and then you become the next shoemaker, and it continues that you just go, well, when I grow up, I'll become a shoemaker too. It kind of like that in the Pueblo society, where it's like, if you're born into a family of potters, you will be handed clay, and maybe, you'll take to it or not, but more than likely you will, because that's so much part of your world that you just know it. And the difference, I would say, with what I grew up with versus when I step outside of that culture is the real connection to the earth and the landscape around us, because the potters, the traditional potters here, they don't go buy their clay at a store. They go to clay pits. They go to sacred sites that they go and pray before taking the clay chunks and then processing it at home to make the clay that they like. And it's part of, for us, using the earth in any way is is being connected to place, but the earth itself is seen very much as our mother and our original mother. So the earth mother is anything you get from the earth. So if you go get clay, you ask the earth mother, you know, if you could have some of the clay. And you look for signs. We're very much into like look around, see if she says no or yes, because there are signs that happen. You know, if a big rock lands on your head, it's a no. You know, maybe
That's a good one. I'll remember that one. Okay.
Yeah, but you know, maybe something really pretty, you suddenly see a flower and you go, that's a yes. You know, yeah, there's signs. So you look for them. And then you can use the clay in a respectful way, because you know it's part of her body. It's your mother's body you're using, and she's letting you use that. So there's a real connection to feeling like the clay isn't just this stuff, it's somebody. And so as somebody, you treat it in a different way.
Yeah, that's lovely. And it goes back to your earlier comment about joy and gratitude. And if you approach these things being grateful, then you'll find joy. And you know what you're doing is it's imbued with importance, because it has to be worthwhile, right? If you're going to use your mother's body to do this. And it's really connected to everything we do in life is connected to our parents and all of our ancestors and the earth. And if we all approached everything we did that way, things would be better. Anyway, and then just a final comment about that is that I see that beautiful painting of your daughter and your granddaughter behind your head. So it goes on with more ceramic artists. Is your granddaughter interested in clay too?
Yeah, she gets her hands in everything.
Yeah. So I know that people are excited to both see images of your work, and you said that you might have some process images. So
and this is a perfect time because I have some images of just process, and it ties in with what we're talking about really well.
Okay, great. So I'm making you a co-host, so then you can share your screen. Okay, that should be good now.
Your screen.
Perfect. Yep. Oh, there she is.
Let's see if I can make it bigger for us.
Yeah.
There, can you see that?
That's perfect. Mm-hmm.
All right, in this one, you know, it shows a large piece I built a few years back, but I use the coil and scrape method. So everything's a pinch pot. And I have, you know, I work around my children and my grandchildren now. Here's my youngest grandchild who's playing with clay as I'm working with the clay. And she's always comes in and says, you know, I help you, Grandma. And so I have to give her an area she can like scrape and poke at and play with. But it's a family event.
Yeah.
So even if it's a small figurine to a large piece, I usually work with a coil and scrape method. This is me working on a very large wall relief I did for the city of Santa Fe. And figures were actually done on the floor. They were 21 feet wide. And I formed them on the floor, and then I hollowed them out after they got leather hard in order to fire them. And they were done like a jigsaw puzzle, so that after I fired them, then I could put them back together again on the wall. But a large piece. This is a maquette of it, of the whole piece. So like I was saying, we think about community a lot here. And so that piece for the Santa Fe Civic Center was about community. And as a baby is born, you have the nucleus family, but you have the aunts and uncles, and then the grandparents and the great grandparents, and then the ones that have gone on before, the ancestors. And so, to honor Santa Fe, the city, as it was a nucleus of a small group of community of a people that grew and grew. And as a human species, I always think we are sort of this blooming flower constantly, and the new petals come in with the babies, and the old petals go out to the edges and soon drop off, but they're still there in spirit, in memory. And so it's for that thought, that memory.
It's lovely.
This is me working on the Denver Art Museum piece. It's a large 14-foot high sculpture that's made out of just dry mud. And so what they wanted, something for the entrance of their third floor. And so they didn't want to do a bronze piece, and hauling in adobes is very heavy. So we decided to use the straw wattles that they use for the side of the highway to keep the erosion from happening. And basically use them. They come in these long tube-like straw things, and I could form them, and then I'd sew them together to this sort of a shell of a figure. And then we gathered mud, different clays and muds in the community, and covered her with the mud and let it dry, and added more and added more. And the community helped. So we had lots and lots of people come every day and mix mud and put mud on the mud woman. And this is her.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And she sits with 4 babies in her lap. And again, the sort of the theme of the earth is our mother. So she's the big figure, and that's clay dirt from where I'm from. And then there's the red mud from on our way, because I was driving back and forth to Denver. And so I was finding the different clays along the side of the road that had different, clay pigments, different colors. And that was what I used for, the babies. So they were showing that here's the earth mother, but here's her baby. And we come in all different colors and sizes, but we're still her children. We're all still her babies. The dark baby.
Oh, sorry.
The dark baby was from Denver dirt outside of the museum. I went wandering around in parking lots until I found some clay, and we picked that up, and that was the Denver clay baby.
Is she still intact? Is it a permanent?
It's a permanent piece in the Denver Art Museum. She's called Mud Woman Rolls On, meaning that we continue as generation after generation. And she's just dried mud.
Yeah. Do you have to go, fix her if she cracks, or she's just fine the way she is? I don't know why I'm focusing on the practical part of it. But
I did have to go repair her, and this is actually me there last year, because they rearranged that floor of the museum. They had to move her, and in the process of dragging her to the next room, she got some cracks. And so they asked me to come repair her, and that's me just finished repairing her, and she's and she's part of the museum from now on.
Wow.
And her hair is grass, thatched grass.
Oh,
so fun.
That's so cool.
So
the Denver Museum.
Yeah, Denver Museum.
Denver Art Museum. And this is just a smaller piece of mine, about 20 inches high, figure that represents kind of our belief system here, that the earth mother is the connection we have to her, makes us strong, makes us good as good children, so to speak. She's called strong heart because for us, you know, when they say, oh, that person has a heart of gold, we actually have a saying too, but it says they have a heart of earth. And that's the best heart you could have, is if your heart is like the earth, you are in good shape. So those are my pictures I have to share.
Okay, thank you. I have pictures of your piece in the show.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave mine this way because otherwise it gets a little messed up on my screen, but here we go. So there's when you walk into the exhibition, that's the first thing you see. And this is the fisheye, so you can see the whole gallery. And as I said, people often sort of make a beeline back for Roxanne's sculpture as you walk towards it. The other things that are in conversation. And then these are some images that Roxanne shared with us when she was just finished making the piece. And it's called Put Down the Man Baby. And everybody, you know, it really, you told me once that you like to draw people in with humor, and then tell them something important. And I give a lot of tours of this exhibition, and every time they chuckle and they walk towards it. And then I tell you know, what you wrote in your artist statement, and every single person like nods and says, yep. So maybe you could tell us in your words about the reason that it's called Put Down the Man Baby.
Oh, this was an incredibly difficult piece to make because of the subject matter. I love the challenge of making a bigger than life-size figure. So she's done in 3 parts actually, so that she could fit in the kiln, and I could carry her in now she's in like 2 parts that you could carry. But I knew that I wanted to make a figure of a woman holding a child. And as I was going further in it, I realized the child was not going to be a baby the way we think of a baby, because of having, you know, gone through 60 years now of living in the world the way it is, and having the experiences I have had, and dealing with not just cultural differences, but also gender issues. And having been married 5 times, I studied myself and what is wrong with this picture. And I had to create this figure that was basically looking at myself and telling myself something I really needed to look at. But I also knew that it was bigger than just me. It was a problem with the world at large, and that what is this thing that we keep allowing to happen that's not good. And so this is the image I created to tell that story. And she stands there and she actually is looking a little bit deer in headlights of sort, because she is being told to put down the man baby. And she's been carrying this baby man who should not be a baby man. He should be grown up. He should be a man. He should, you know, babies are to be babies, not grown up people. And he's partly to blame, but she's partly to blame. You know, it's this bad setup to start with. It's like, if we keep allowing not good things to happen, then we don't let good change come in. And it can be difficult to change our ways, but we need to do it. And after, going through a pandemic and dealing with all that, and just watching the issues we're having in the world with the environmental issues and political issues and COVID issues, and oh my gosh, just so many issues. It's hard not to say, what are we doing wrong as human beings? So, this is asking all of us, and myself especially, to like really face what we're doing that we maybe should stop doing. And in this, her little fingers are opening up because she's starting to do what she needs to do. She's going to put them down. And what I realized for my own self was that I had to go through the feelings of actually doing what this sculpture is telling me to do. And I was amazed how scary it was. Like how much fear came up. It's like, well, what if he gets really mad? Or what, like, what will the man baby do if he doesn't get what he wants? Was the question. And I have to realize that, I call it the man baby, but it could be anybody. It could be your mom. It could be your wife or husband. It could be your children. It could be, anybody in the world that is, is out of place and not behaving well, and you're allowing it to continue. Because you're too afraid to say something or to stop. You're enabling. And like how much, and we know that something shouldn't be the way it is, but we just kind of put our head down and just go along with it. And we stop allowing it to go on is the point of the sculpture.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. Change is the scariest thing. So changing the way that you interact with a person or the way you are handling something is scarier than anything else, because just like you said, you don't know what's going to happen, or if we all have fears like that. And it's so important. Well, I just want you to know that everyone who hears that story is getting it. And I tell them, Roxanne asks you all think about who that person is in your life, and they're all nodding. So you've helped by helping other people think about just that, and that we all have people like that in our lives. Or, like you're saying, that we need to take responsibility along with figuring out how to make peace. Thank you for that explanation. And I know it's emotional and important. Can you also tell us a little bit about what the cross-hatching patterns on her hand and her foot are?
That's actually, I was playing around with using what is it? Grout. It's actually grout. And the clay body is a high fired or mid-range fire. It's about cone 6 fire clay. But in order to put the legs and the skirt part, the hips part, I had glued it. It had epoxy under the skirt, which I then dangled. I dangled these really cool nails to make a little lace skirt, because I thought that would be really cute. It didn't need it because I realized that you couldn't see the seam anyway, but it was kind of fun. And I thought, I glued it on, and because it's nails, I used wire. And then I thought, well, how do I cover this wire up that I had epoxied on it? And Rose, my daughter, had been playing around with grog, the grog you put in between tiles. You could mix it any color you want, and you add a little of the cement hardener on it, and it gets pretty damn nice and hard. So I tried it out, and it was just like wonderful stuff. So that's what I ended up making the pattern on the dress. because the clay body is, what her face and her legs are and all that. And so I just wanted to add some color and other interest on her. Mm-hmm. So I actually first started with the foot because I was messing around with it and Rose was there and I says, well, how about we try this? And I start taping her foot off and playing around and I went, wow, that's pretty fun. And that's then I knew that I could play around with the dress that way. So that's it. It was just like experimenting with a new product.
Well, it's yeah. And the pattern on her dress, is that a reference to a specific clothing, or is it just your own made up pattern?
Yeah, it's just a made up pattern.
Yeah. And is there meaning to the fact that she has the crosses on her feet, on her foot and her hand? I mean, apart from that, you were playing with something new.
There is. We do crosses as a protection. They're kind of like also seen as stars, so that the stars are also kind of seen as like ancestors. So they're watching, they're protecting you. So trying to tell her, as she's having to do something really difficult and really scary to put down the man baby, trying to give her some generational support in saying, you're not alone. We're here with you. You can do this. You can do this.
That's great. Thank you. So I also, for those people who don't know, that Rose has an exhibition up in Philadelphia now as well. In several of the pieces in her dream house have those crosses. And then at the end, there's a room where you can kind of sit on the cushions and look up, and the crosses are in those hanging pieces. So, every time I look at yours, I think about that, how it's across town. We have the nice mother-daughter thing happening as well. And then a lot of people note that the nails, they're like construction nails, right? That are hanging from her skirt.
Yeah.
And just something that you had around and you thought they looked cool.
They were just beautiful. Yeah. Given that she's, this massive standing piece, I thought it was pretty neat to make lace out of nails. It's kind of like we're tougher than we think. We may look delicate, but again, this feeling of like we're stronger than we think too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that it gives her a feeling of strength, that her lace is made of nails. So Jennifer Martin just said in the chat that the crosses to her look like bandages as well, which they have that sort of, which is in a way a symbol of healing, because when we're caring for each other and we're bandaging. That's lovely. Well, I want to make sure I give people time to ask questions. I do have a couple more images in here, so I'll just quickly show people some other of the images that when I did research on your work and got to see one of your pieces last year at the Barnes Foundation in an exhibition about Native American ceramics. I just was so thrilled that you said yes to being in our show, because I'm just a huge fan and I think your work is so important. And I found the same one. Oh, there it is again. So, and this, I'll just end with this one, which is the installation at the the American Indian Museum in Washington, D.C. that I got to see in person recently. And I think it's bronze and ceramic. Is that right?
It's bronze and ceramic. The faces are the clay, and the figures we bronzed into. We molded and bronze, but they were originally clay. And these ones symbolize, they asked me to do this wall at the Smithsonian there, and it had to represent all Native Americans of North America. And I was like, whoa, I'm from one tiny little tribe in northern New Mexico. And but I sat with it for a long time, and I thought about what image would be okay to represent Native America. And I chose the balance between male and female, that the balance and the dance between both gender is very important, that you can't have one without the other. And when one is placed above the other, you get imbalances. And so I created this piece about balance here. And so in the middle, you have 4 figures, 2 men, 2 women, and they're holding hands in the center that twirl out, because the spiral and the circular motion of everything is very important for movement. And then you get the bridged faces to acknowledge all the peoples of the world. And on one side, then you have a male dancer and a female dancer. And those signify where I'm from. Those are dancers from my village. So it honors me as the maker and where I'm from. But again, honoring the balance between male and females.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to see if anyone has any questions. Oops, there's something. Oh, Cheryl asked about your other work in Philadelphia. I know it said it was at the University of Pennsylvania Museum. Can you tell us about your work that's there, Roxanne?
I'm not sure what.
I don't know. It was in your bio that you have work at the University of Pennsylvania Museum. So maybe they just have a piece in their collection.
Yeah, they probably have a piece in the collection. I'm not sure which one they have.
I'll have to go find out. I'll let you know. I have friends there too. Oh, Tunde, someone in the room has a question.
Hi, I was just wondering, like, how did, like, working with clay in a different capacity for, like, building the home, interact with, like, your personal practice, or how do they interact with one another?
I don't know. Were you able to hear the question?
I caught some of it. You're asking if my building, how is building connected to my art?
Yeah, why don't you, Tunde's going to come over here so she can ask again.
I was just wondering how, like, constructing the Adobe home, and like that, like the way you have to like kind of like form that interacts with like your own art practice, or how they interact with one another, if like any of them inform one another. But like the Mud Woman piece also kind of like seems like those two places meeting together. But that was my question.
Yes, good question. And that's why I showed the Mud Woman rolls on, because it is like building a house or structure, but it's a sculptural thing. And I find that I'm a pretty good construction worker, meaning I work really well in mud building, because I've sculpted all my life, and it's very similar. It's just bigger. It's just, sculpting something you live inside. So yes, it's very connected.
It's vessels, right? Vessels that hold food, vessels that hold ideas, vessels to hold people, all related. Does anyone else have a question? Oh, Amy.
Well, in the man baby piece, it seems to me that I just want to ask you: is the fear that one faces in that situation about being alone? It's like once you let that man baby go, then you don't, then you're alone. That's what I got from it.
I think that's for each of us, I think that's a personal like thing. For me, what I saw come up was not just fear of being alone so much as I got brought up where we were told, you don't upset anybody, and if you're in a society where everybody is like taught to like help each other, like you look around, if somebody needs help, you go help them, if you just do that. But if you come across a culture where maybe they don't do that, they instead you have to go get what you want out there. And so if they're saying, I want this, then I'm programmed to go, okay, and I run and do that. So and they just keep taking, I keep giving, and then, you know, it gets not healthy because they're not seeing, oh, I need to help you too, or a back and forth thing. So I think for me, it became like a cultural confusion and a fear of upsetting anybody, and realizing that this was a cultural thing I had hit. And I wasn't trained how to deal with people getting upset. It was like, you just don't do that. So now I'm faced with, oh, people got upset because I didn't do what I was, you know, made them upset. So I was like, so that's mine.
Yeah. Yeah, we all, and that's a man-woman thing too, or probably any relationship, is that one person is the people pleaser. Anyway, we could go down a path that I probably don't want to go down right now. Oh, Marianne wants to say something. Marianne, she has professional insight, perhaps.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm really relating to this since I've done 35 years of therapy with women and women's issues, and trying to learn to say no, to teach people to say no, thank you, or I can't do that, or it's too much for me. Big piece. But my question was more technical. What was it like when I go to New Mexico? So much of the work and the history and the pieces I have been pit fired. So, and then there was a movement toward more electric kilns. And so I'm wondering what it was like to fire these pieces, how you kind of left the traditional and moved to a new way of firing.
Well, I've been using electric kilns for a long time now. So it's been a long time. I find that recently I made a whole bunch of pots for a ceremony that's going on here, and they fired. And it was snowing outside, so I didn't have any dry area to pit fire them in. So I sat there and I fired them one by one in the wood stove, and they came out really wonderful. And I was just reignited with the realization that we don't need a kiln, that we can like fire things with what we have around us, and it works. So for me, it was almost like I've been kiln firing for so long now that it was really fun to go back the other direction. But you know, there's a lot of potters, even here, traditional potters, that are moving towards the kilns because you can preheat them really slowly and you get less explosions happening. And you know, that's their income, so they're not wanting it to blow up.
Did your mother and your grandmother do the pit traditional firings?
But yes, they did. And my grandmother never stopped doing pit firing. My mother did venture into firing in a gas kiln that she built in the yard. But even though she had moved into trying higher fired clays and glazes, because she made our family's pots and dishes, she dug all her own clays. So I don't know anyone who finds high fired clay in the hills or mixes their own glazes from, you know, the dirt they found on the side of the highway. She was still doing that, but figuring out how to high fire them in gas kilns.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Welcome.
Wonderful. And Jennifer Martin asks, what's next? So do you have a big project on the horizon, or what are you working on right now?
I actually own a gallery in Pewaukee, New Mexico, called the Roxanne Swentzell Tower Gallery. And it's literally a tower. It's a 4-story adobe tower. It's, I believe it's still the tallest adobe building in the United States. So if you ever come in the area, it's just a fascinating building itself. But being a tower, I have these like floors that I can play with the different floors. And this past fall, I got into making these very giant heads. They're some of them are 3 feet by 3 feet, you know, giant clay bulbs, just these heads. They don't have no necks, they just are heads. And so I have, I think there's 9 or 10 of them on the top floor. So there's just this room with these big old heads. But it's an ongoing show. So the next floor below, I want to make all these torsos and these arms, so that you, like, if you just see these torsos without legs or heads, what can you do with that? And then the bottom floor, I want to do all feet and legs and bottoms and have them all separate like this. So you walk in from the tower to the middle to the bottom, and you get this sense of, thank you for sharing that. You get a sense of the human body in pieces, in parts, and not all together. And you could imagine them, you know, your instinct, I'm hoping, would be wanting to put them together. But the idea of it came about with the way I've watched the politics in the world of late. I keep feeling like we're acting as if we're not a whole body. The world, it's like we're all on this planet together, and we're all having to figure out how we're not going to destroy our home so we can continue living here in a good way. But we're acting as if we're not. We're like, our arm is over there, our head's over there, our legs are somewhere else. We're not acting as one being. We're not acting as a whole. And thinking that if you beat up this arm, it's going to affect the whole body. It's like you can't destroy one part of this beautiful planet of ours or those groups of people without hurting all of us. Because we're all connected, we're all one being on this planet. And when we start destroying one part, you know, our kidneys fail, or our heart has problems, or our brain isn't, you know, it's like we're acting as if we're not connected, which we are. So the show I'm trying to put together is to show how we're acting as if we're parts instead of a whole.
That's amazing. I mean, also the fact that, you know, oh, by the way, I'm a gallerist. Oh, by the way, I have this other organization. You're an amazing human. You do so many things. I'll just say that there are so many threads that you talked about today that are also connected to other works in the exhibition, like Kensuke Yamada's piece is a body with 2 heads. And he talks about how we as humanity, we are one body. And there are many of us, and we have to learn how to share. And so that's why he has the 2 heads. And Kyunming Park's piece is, it has apples as one of the themes. And she talks about the word in Korean for apple sounds like I'm sorry. And as a woman, she has trying to teach herself to stop saying I'm sorry so much, which is one of the things also that you talked about. So I'm really, again, I'm so honored that you're part of the exhibition, and the importance of what all the artists are trying to say really it's a privilege to be working with artists who are doing this important work. And I continue to be amazed by you again, like all of these wonderful things you're doing. I hope someday to get to come and visit your gallery and everything else. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.